I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Paint a Beautiful Picture's Saturday session. This is Alyssa Haney. You've seen this beautiful girl before, and she has some questions for me today. We will see if some of this is helpful to you. I still haven't heard a lot of questions out of you guys. Go to the website, paintabeautifulpicture.com. Give us questions here on YouTube, Rumble, or Spreaker. And I will be really thrilled to discuss the things that you would like to hear more about as we go along. But in the meantime, don't worry. We have plenty of material to cover. It's good to have you here, Alyssa.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Good girl. Yes? What would you like to ask me about first?
I guess we will go with one of the first questions. So how do you deal with a defensive person? Like somebody that's always, no matter what you say or do or anything, they're just coming after you and you just can't do anything right.
Okay, so they're not only just defensive. Once they've been defensive, they're going to get a little aggressive. So they have to defend their position and attack yours. Is that what you're describing to me?
Basically.
Okay, that's a great question. I actually have a few siblings that are extraordinarily defensive people, and so I kind of know about this one. And it's not very easy or very pleasant to have to handle this, and I acknowledge that too. Okay, so you have this person, and you're not even telling them anything personal. They don't have a reason to defend themselves. You're talking about your own ideas, your own emotions, your own events, even something that happened to you. And they have this great need to get defensive. Usually you're dealing with a really insecure person. And sometimes you're dealing with an insecure person who's also angry. That's a really lethal combination. And so you cannot stop their behavior. That really is the truth. You understand that? You have no control over anyone except yourself. Wow. Isn't that disappointing? Would you just like to find the off switch sometime?
Yes.
Or is that only me?
Oh, girl. I think that's all of us.
Well, it's good to know we're in good company, right?
Yes.
Oh, man. All right. So you do have to know you don't have control over that person's behavior. You only have control over yourself. One of the things you can do, though, to help it a lot is to be as non-threatening as possible. I just want you to know there's this really interesting psychological event called the boomerang effect, where in fact you get calmer and you are non-threatening and they escalate. Like they're just bound and determined to fight with you. So you're on an equal plane and you're talking to them and they start escalating. Okay, so you intentionally bring it down a couple notches and they go even higher. There's something about that that is a little odd, but you'll see it happen sometimes. So you try to get really calm and you're hoping that they're going to come down with you, except they ain't coming. Just don't let
exactly,
that.
because they are looking to get a certain response out of you. When they don't get it, they try even harder.
There you go. All right, so let's talk about a scenario. This is a really common one. I hope it doesn't light anyone's fire overly hard, but I'm going to bring it up. You're at a family dinner and someone says, I can't believe you still don't have your COVID vaccination. Now, I would like to say this to you as an RN. HIPAA, the Health Information Personal Protection Act, was put into place to protect people with HIV or AIDS. They did not have to tell anyone about their medical status or their disease status unless they wish to disclose it. That still is in effect. That is a federal law. That means if someone starts to ask you questions or bug you or push you about your COVID vaccination status, they don't have a right by law to ask you those questions. I just want you to know that. In case you didn't know that. So go ahead.
Then how do people still do that? Like even businesses,
right?
Will do that.
That's because people don't know the law and they don't know that they're protected by those laws. But as a health professional, I do. All right, so you're at the dinner table and someone's like, I still can't believe you aren't COVID vaccinated. And you say really calmly, well, actually, you don't know if I'm vaccinated or not, but that isn't really any of your business. Let's talk about light up the fireworks, honey, right? I mean, I've been in a few places. There have been some massive, big time fights and conversations and heavy duty arguments and a whole lot of stuff that's gone down about this whole COVID story. That's why I wanted to use this one because it's so pertinent and it's definitely happened a lot. Do you know a person who's sure they're right? They've read everything there is to read and they know that you should not be vaccinated. And or take your other choice, a person who knows they're right and they've read everything and they've watched the news and they've listened to various studies and they go, you have got to be, and if you don't, you're very irresponsible and you're being stupid. And who's right? That's really up to you, isn't it? It's your own body. You have to make that decision. And yet, these two people, they want to fight about this. And one of them, I don't care which one, take your pick, A or B, decides this is really a pointless argument. And they say, I'm really not going to have this argument anymore. It isn't necessary. But the person who needs to be right so very hard, they're not exactly going to give it up. They're not going to lay it down. They're not going to get off the topic. They're going to push and push and push and push their agenda and basically try to beat you up emotionally. And all of it comes out of their defensiveness. And many defensive people, let's be real, most defensive people need to be right, are sure that they are right. And that means you've got to be wrong. A couple weeks ago, we did an episode about perspective. That when one person stands in one place and one stands another 180 degrees different, they are not going to see the same things. And one is not necessarily right or wrong, just the vantage point or the perspective is different. A defensive person doesn't have an easy time hearing that, nor understanding or believe it. They're right, and that's all there is, and there's no other option available. Honestly, occasionally, with a really super defensive person, one of the very best things to do, and it's not a comfortable thing, especially the first few times in your life that you do it, in person, you say, I don't believe that we're going to come to a resolution right now, and I have no intention of fighting with you. And since it seems to me that you would rather fight than come to a resolution, I'm going to excuse myself for a few minutes. In 5 or 10 minutes, I'll be back. You walk out the room. I kid you not, sometimes they'll follow you. Walk out of the house. Honest to really, this has happened to me. Sometimes they'll follow you out of the house. If possible, take your keys, get in your car, lock the door, drive around the block. I'm not kidding you. I've been in places with certain friends or certain family members. It's been that bad. Get into the car, drive around the block.
'Cause they won't leave you alone.
They just will not give it up. I told you I got some really stubborn, tenacious, difficult
So
family
they just
members.
feel like they need to shove it down your throat and make it digest and everything.
Yeah, it's going to happen on their terms or none. And that's the point. You have to get to the
Mhm.
place where you can break the cycle. Oh, no.
Mhm.
No. We aren't coming to a resolution, and I'm not going to participate. And you get your behind up off the chair, and you leave the room. And like I said, if you
Mhm.
need to, you leave the house. And if
Yeah.
you need to, you get in the car and you leave the yard. You really find a point of separation. They're going to be so frustrated, so mad, so, oh my lands. And you
Mhm.
know what? That isn't your problem.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's good. I mean, it just made me remember an incident that happened the other day, and I may have not handled it exactly right in the beginning, but once I saw it was escalating, I was like, "Nope, I'm sorry. Like, I'm leaving this room because I'm not dealing with this." And I walked out and did whatever and came back, and everything had been dropped and it was fine. But I just knew if I had stayed there, that was, three of us headstrong sisters in the same room. And I knew I wasn't getting anywhere with them, so I just excused myself. And one of them, she didn't necessarily follow me, but she had some remarks, and I just acted like I didn't hear it. I was like, I'm not responding. I'm not going to acknowledge that.
Right.
No.
So let me tell you something in general about relationships. And this is a really interesting one. It's challenging, but it works so great. It doesn't work the first time and maybe not even the fifth or sixth, but it will eventually change, especially in family relationships. We get into these dances and we all dance the same steps, kind of like a line dance in country music, especially back in the 80s and 90s when it was a big deal. You'd have 100 people on the floor. Everybody knew the steps. They're doing the exact same steps around and around. Suddenly, someone changes the steps and everybody gets really awkward. You got to change the steps. So they think they know how this whole dance is going to go, and suddenly either you get right off the dance floor or you radically change the dance steps. They have no choice in the matter. They're going to have to do something differently sooner or later. Or they're going to trip over you and somebody's going to get hurt. But really, in relationships, that generally involves change is going to come. That's really great in a relationship, say with your spouse, your mate, or if you have an adult child and for a long time you've had this kind of unhealthy element in a portion of your relationship, you change the step. So if every time it goes a particular way, somebody gets mad enough to slap somebody, somebody gets mad enough to break things, someone starts getting really insulting and cussing their head off and acting a fool, you say, yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to stay here long enough for this to go where it usually goes, and I'm going to be leaving the room now. You don't yell and scream at them, I'm getting out of here, you idiot. I don't have to put up with this. You never heard me say that. It is, I'm going to get out of here now. I'll be back in a few minutes. I hope in that time you have time to think about this or to calm down. I will be back. Sometimes it's really good if they're a pretty out of control human being to give them a time frame. I'm going to be back in 10 minutes, but I am leaving the room now. And you leave that room. And like I said, they might follow you. Now, on the phone, it's even more fascinating because they're used to yelling and screaming at you till you get mad enough to hang up, whatever, and you say this to them. And oh my word, I'll remember the first time I used this on one of my sisters. Wow! Wee! Was she hot? And it was. I'm really sorry, but you have no reason to be abusive to me. I don't intend to listen to this. I'm saying this while she's still yelling and cussing, mind you. I don't intend to listen to this, and I'm going to be hanging up now. Goodbye. And I hung up the phone. It's a lot different than getting really ticked off and angry and hanging up. She called back like 5 minutes later. She starts right back in where she left off. I said, I already told you, I have no intention of listening to you cuss at me and yell at me and be abusive to me. I'm going to be hanging up now. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. Well, then she didn't call me back for a couple weeks. When she called me in a couple weeks, she's like, yeah, I bet you felt really superior, didn't you, talking to me like that? I said, listen, we're not going to go back to this. And if your intention is 2 weeks later to start this all up again, you're going to be horribly disappointed because we're not going to do that. If you want to talk to me about what's been going on in your world or you want to ask me about mine, that's great. But if you want to revisit all of that again, I guess you're going to need to revisit it in your own mind because you aren't going to revisit it with me.
I think that's a key thing is I don't know if it's necessarily pride or whatever it is, but exactly what she said. I bet you felt superior when you did that. They can't stand when somebody else has control over themselves and they're exerting it over the relationship between them. They can't stand not having that control and that mental or whatever power over you. And that just, man, yeah, that sends people in a tizzy. I've heard things kind of similar to that, but definitely with that kind of feel and
Yes.
meaning.
Yes. And the key is you're right. Self-control. I don't have control over you. You don't need to say it out loud. It's already pretty visible. I don't have control over you. Oh, and the underlying message is you're not exercising self-control. I can't help you with that, but I do have control over myself. And while I have control over my own self, I'm leaving now before it gets out of hand. You don't have to say that, but it's very insightful that you understand it. And so that's what I said. As you change the dance steps, in time, maybe a lot of times, it might take 6 months to a year before you even see a little bit of change, especially if you're dealing with a really insecure person. And as I said many times, it is insecure people who are defensive. Once they see you consistently exert self-control, it might actually lead them to say to themselves, huh, I wonder if I could practice self-control. I literally have seen a pretty significant difference in that in particular sibling of mine. It's probably taken almost 10 years.
Wow.
And so you just have to consistently do what is healthy, productive, true communication. Don't buy into the junk, and persevere. It can work.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Great advice.
Earlier today, we were talking about being a parent in today's world. And as a young woman, I'm sure that a lot of other young women would be similar to you. So I thought I would ask you this question. What makes you the most scared when you think about having a baby?
Well, I will definitely say giving birth to the child, first of all, but probably the biggest thing, even more than that, is how do you raise a child in today's world without them, succumbing to just how people live these days. Like, it's just so degrading and just very, I just see it as evil, honestly. It's just not a very good world out there, and I'm afraid that I won't be capable enough to keep my child from being lured into a lot of the lifestyles that are predominant in today's world.
Okay. All right, so I'll start at the beginning. I would say any sane, normal young woman would be afraid of childbirth. You'd have to be foolish not to be. If somebody was going to take a sledgehammer and come toward you and you knew they were going to break your leg, yeah, you'd be scared of that. And I've had a broken leg and 2 children. I have to tell you, they all hurt about equally badly. And so you're signing up for this. You know you're going to have a baby and you know it's going to hurt. Wow. Okay. So it is normal to have a realistic viewpoint or a certain amount of fear about childbirth. Let me tell you, this is what I tell young women a lot of times all over the globe, so I've given this speech, if you will, before. We go through a lot of things that hurt. We really do. We just handle it because it's part of the deal. And certainly a lot of things we go through that hurt don't have much reward. But childbirth, it's awesome. Because as soon as it's over with, you have a baby. And I promise you that the average person really does predominantly forget most of the pain. Now, if someone has a really horrific birth experience, they might actually remember it. It might be so traumatic that it sticks with them. And some people have complications or things that go on, and it doesn't just physically hurt them, it can literally emotionally hurt them as well. And I've certainly seen that, in all my years of practice. And I know that that I've been with well over 25,000 women in the labor process, so I've seen a lot of things. And definitely sometimes people go through emotional trauma as well as physical pain. With all of that being said, though, we understand there are 6 billion people on the planet right now. Apparently, a lot of people have been through this. The vast majority have made it through, lived through it. They're doing just fine. Some people have done it as many as 10 or 15 or 16 times. They're still here. Then they
Wow.
do it again. I just say that to you because realistically, that's reassurance. Yes, it hurts. I'm not going to lie. How much it hurts, I can't possibly say. One of my children hurt me so badly, one of them was a piece of cake. But you have no way of knowing. You just have to get up to the beginning of the race and see what you end up with. And my mom, who bore 8 children, told me the truth. She said some of them were horrible. Some of them, there was just nothing to it. You just have to find out as you go along what's going to happen. Yeah. And some of it is mental preparedness. That's why they have childbirth classes. Some of it is good support. That's why they always encourage you to have support people with you during your pregnancy as well as during your delivery. And of course, in today's modern world with things like epidurals and pain meds, it's pretty manageable.
Yeah. Well, that is encouraging.
So then I'll go to your second part. When you talk about what it's like to raise a child in today's world. Okay. I heard in a sermon one time this pastor read a newspaper article. It talked about how distressing the world was. all these gang members going around killing each other and killing people in the general public, and all the thievery and the mayhem and the destruction, people burning down buildings, vandalism. It was just crazy, and said, I'm not sure it would be a responsible thing to bring a human being into this world. This was around maybe 2003, I think, that I heard this sermon. And this newspaper article had been written in 1899. I know, right? That was everyone's response in the whole church. Like for over 100 years, these kinds of things had been going on. So we look at our day and age and we feel like it's really terrible and there are really bad things. I'm not minimizing that there are bad things in the world. That isn't what I'm doing. What I'm letting you know is I believe that in every age, and maybe at every new century, or as in every place in the world, as people look at it, they question, is it a good idea to bring a child into the world? This world has trouble, and it has been a troublesome place since almost the beginning of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a common question that young people ask, and I think it's a reasonable question. And it's part of why this challenge, in my mind anyway, of Paint a Beautiful Picture exists, that young people would start to develop in their thoughts, in their life story, things that they need, skills and character development in order to be a good parent. Because in any age, I think it's a challenge to raise a productive adult. It is.
Yeah.
It really is. There are always forces against you. Okay,
Exactly.
so I will acknowledge to you in today's day and age, with our economic factors and our socialization factors post-COVID, and certainly some of the agendas that are being pushed by others, and I won't name them or go into them because that's not my point. My point is the general idea that we have some really unique challenges to face and to overcome in order to raise a child. But that's why I always go back to the underlying principle. If you are a person of character, if a mom and a dad work together and they have a certain level of agreement and they take responsibility for their parenting, they have a great likelihood of teaching and training a child to be a good person. They do. So regardless of the challenges or the current age or the common frustrations known within your generation, still, I earnestly believe it's very possible to raise a good kid.
That's true. It's just challenging, and it's also a lifelong thing once you have that child. It's not just 18 years and then they're out the door, because that's not always the case. And it's, it's a lifelong deal.
It is. The level of responsibility diminishes because you know this. You're 21 now as a young adult. Though your mom and dad still have a level of responsibility in your life, ultimately, you are really responsible for your life now. I'm just going to tell it to you really straight. You go out and get drunk. You get into a car accident. You become paralyzed from the waist down. Yeah, that's going to be a burden for your mom and dad. That's going to break their hearts. But ultimately, you are going to bear the brunt of that irresponsible choice that you made. It's a lot different than if you're 5 or 6. You're a young adult. Now you really are responsible for yourself. You may not yet be fully capable of buying a home and taking care of everything that has to get taken care of in your life. And thank the Lord, you have really good supportive parents, and they're still continuing to help you as you get ready to go to college more. But honestly, you are responsible for your life and what you're doing now. So though they have a level of responsibility, it's definitely diminishing as your personal responsibility for yourself is increasing. That'll happen with your kids too.
Yeah.
If you raise them to be independent, responsible, self-sustaining adults.
Oh, yeah.
That will happen.
That is exactly what I plan on. But I think a little bit of fear comes with that too, because it's like, oh, even if they're super independent, it obviously depends how your kids are, and if how mature they are, but it can be a scary thing if your child is super independent, but yet with that independence, they don't always make wise choices. So then you're left to sort of worry about it and kind of be just apprehensive of what might happen because of that freedom of independence. But like you said, when they're of age, obviously 21 or even 18, they have a certain level of independence, even legally and whatnot. So you kind of worry about what they might get themselves into, and you really don't have a whole lot of power or control over. And I think that has to do with you as a parent, and also how you raise your child. But it's just the dynamics. It gets a little rocky once things start shifting, and you have to learn how to let them have responsibility and learn how to keep yourself under control, not try to control their world even when they are capable of doing so.
Right. Okay, so let me address a few things in there because I think that's awesome. My first comment to you would be this, and you know me so well, Alyssa. I can say this to you, and if you've been watching me a while, you know me pretty well too, so handle this. I kid you not about what I'm going to tell you right now. You don't need to worry. You do your job. You do the best you can. You lay them a very firm foundation. You teach them the principles of life that they need. You relentlessly pour down everything they need into their life for 16, 17, 18 years. And after you have done that, you let go. Because you did what you could do. And now they have to make their own choices. Wow, I know you've heard me talk about this. It doesn't mean they won't make some scary choices occasionally. It doesn't mean they won't make some poor choices or disappointing ones. Things that will make you crazy for a while as a parent. But when you've really loved them and trained and taught them in honest confidence, you can let them go. You can let them be a young adult and make some mistakes and find their way. I'm kidding you not. I've been through this. Now I'm watching my son and my daughter-in-law go through this with my grandsons. I got a couple generations of this going on now. If you really raise them well, teach them and train them, love them, give them a secure and stable environment, then when it's time to let them go, you can let them go. You can trust their life to the hands of God. He's a much better daddy than us. He will look after our kids. He will take care of things. Yeah.
Well, that is definitely calming, reassuring.
Good.
Stuff I will need to remember. Because honestly, I haven't seen a whole lot of that really practiced, of what you just said about doing what you can do and then letting go.
Yeah.
And letting God.
Yes. And you've heard me say, and you have heard me say as well, that when we have really been a good parent, the goal is that we raise a man. We raise a woman. We don't raise a child. You raise a man. You raise a woman. And always the goal for a man or a woman is that they go and live their own life. So when you've given them the foundation they need and you've taught them to be responsible and how to do it, really how to do it, and given them the support and the love that they've got to have, they have the freedom to go and you have the flexibility to let them go. Yeah, a big deal.
So a couple of years ago, I suffered the loss of someone who was very close to me. And since then, it's had pretty big ramifications on, I guess I would say, just how I function or how I think and how life has been. I guess it's just changed thought patterns and behaviors in a way. Some of the ones that have really been sort of a struggle for me is, I guess, having control over things. And when I don't have that control, it is very unnerving. It's very anxiety inducing, which is another part. It's I'm more prone to have anxiety over things, even especially because that friend died in a car accident. If I'm trying to get up with my mom or my sister or someone, and I know they're driving and they're not picking up, they're not picking up, my mind goes there, and I really have to steel myself against the thought of, that that's what happened to them, is that they got in this awful, crazy car wreck, and that's why they're not answering the phone, and just things like that. And hearing ambulances and stuff can kind of be a trigger, and just different things. And now I'm not as I used to be able to handle a lot more high stress situations, or just more high, go, go, go. And now I'm I need more peaceful situations. I don't like doing so much. I can't handle so much or so many people. It's really changed kind of almost my personality in a way, because I'm still very much a people person, love going out and being with people, but it's definitely toned down my extrovertedness and uh, just lots of things. But can you help me with any
Yeah,
of that?
yeah.
Give me some advice.
So what you're describing to me is the impact of a life-altering event. There are so many of them. I'll just describe a few of them. For some people, it might include the loss of a parent, especially a kid anywhere from 6 to 14. That's very life-altering. Not the loss of a parent as in their mom and dad get divorced, but I mean their mom got killed in a head-on car accident, or their dad had a massive stroke at work and just dropped over dead. That is going to continue to affect them for the rest of their lives. That is a major life-altering event. For us, any of us, really, it is often the loss of a young person. For example, my good friend's 19-year-old grandson got killed in a car accident about a year and a half ago. It is still impacting everyone in that family, from the teenagers to the old people. And certainly the loss of a friend of a similar age as you are. So for a teenager, if they have a 16-year-old friend who commits suicide, or a 17-year-old friend who gets killed in a head-on car crash by a drunk, those kinds of unbelievable, unexpected, life-altering events, they are going to have an impact, and oftentimes a lifelong impact. Probably one of the other more significant ones is illness. So if a teenager has a mom or a dad who gets cancer, or a friend of theirs, or their favorite aunt, and they end up dying in their late 20s, early 30s, sometimes even in their early 40s. And in the mind of that young person, no one should be dying at that age. That's not what happens. And yet it is what happens to them. And it was someone they really loved and from whom they received a lot of support. Now that person is gone. That is most assuredly going to be a life event with really significant impact. So that's what you're describing to me. Okay, so let me address this just for a minute. If you've been through some kind of an event that has had such a major impact on you, and it has brought about, truly it can, personality changes or greater fear, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, uh, 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 actually an unexpected result. In other words, some people start doing drugs because they're like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to live that long anyway, and I should party hard while I can and have all the fun I can. And you never dreamt of yourself as being a person who would go get wasted or go get high. And that was your response to it. Um, I just want you to know people do respond in very unexpected ways sometimes to a super impactful event. So rather than getting on your back or having a lot of guilt, or as a parent, rather than dumping a bunch of guilt or laying, things on a kid that they don't really need to handle, get some help. You know that about me. I'm all about get some help, because none of us are going to get through this kind of stuff alone. As I've said, if you were the person in a major car accident, you'd go to a doctor or to an emergency room and you'd get someone to help put you back together. When you've been through this kind of trauma emotionally as a young person, as a kid, as a young adult, you're going to need some help getting it put back together again. Don't think that that's a problem. That is normal, ordinary, and expected. Get some help, whether from a counselor or a pastor or maybe both. That's really okay. All right. The next thing is get support from people who love you. So ideally, that should include your mom and dad, which I know for you it has, but it should also include other significant people, adults whom you respect. Sometimes for a kid, that's a teacher. For a young adult, it might be a professor in their college or, a choir director. Someone shared with me recently that when they were a young person and they went through something really tough, they had a choir director that was really close to them that helped them get through. In addition to maybe having a counselor or someone like that, you need additional support. If you go to the doctor, I'm going to use that illustration again because it's an easily understandable one. It isn't just the doctor that does it. In the OR, there are often 10 or 12 people that are helping to work on you, or in the emergency room at the doctor's office. There's often a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a PA, a physician's assistant, someone besides only just the doctor. It's usually going to take a team to help put you back together, not just a person. So you acknowledge that and you get yourself a team and you work on it. Then you probably need to work on what is worrisome to you the most. I would often say for a lot of people that's panic attacks. They can't handle it. They feel so embarrassed. The first couple times they have a panic attack, another word for that is an anxiety attack. They feel like they're going to die. They feel like they're having a heart attack. It's very, very scary for them. And so you get some help. Again, you might not need medication for the rest of your life, but you might need it for a while. And you might need someone to help process this with you, that it would be a normal, not even an unusual response, that you would be very concerned or have anxiety. People who had a good friend who got killed in a car, they might struggle to get in a car. They don't really want to get their driver's license. They don't want the responsibility of being a driver because of what happened to their friend. That's a normal response. Wow, I can get that one, right? Your description about how you feel scared or nervous when you try to call someone in the car, but you don't get an answer for them right away. I would like to say this to you really gently. In my day, when we went somewhere, we didn't have a phone, right? We got in the car, went wherever we wanted. Nobody could call us. It was awesome, incidentally. We had freedom. Most people today are tied to their phone so hard, they don't have much freedom. If someone's in the car and they got the radio cranked up and they don't want to answer the phone, more power to them. Give people enough room not to freak out when they're gone somewhere. Ultimately, it is about trusting God. Life is in the hands of God, not ours. We kid ourselves. Oh, I can hold on to my life. I'm responsible for myself. Oh, there's a little element of that, but there's a whole lot of element of not really. You can walk right out that door. Some idiot can drive by on the street and just shoot you in the head with an AK-47. We know it happens all over the world every day, sadly, including in the United States of America. You do not have full control, but God does. And we know from Psalm 139, He knows the day of our birth, and He knows the day of our death. Why are we going to be worried sick about that? It's a matter of learning to trust Him. God, I trust you with my own life. I trust you with my mama's life. I trust you with my kids' life. Yeah, I really trust you. And so fear and faith, as we've talked about before, they don't occupy the same space at the same time. You have to decide which one's going to be there. But when there is faith, it really helps get rid of fear. So that'll help alleviate your fears. And then we really do have to come to terms with loss in this life. I wish that wasn't the truth, Alyssa. I mean it with all my heart. I hate it. I have gotten pretty good at handling loss because I recognize that it's a part of what's going to happen. From the time I was a little kid, I started losing aunts and uncles and neighbors, people that really mattered to me, probably because my folks were older by the time I was born.
Yeah.
I was already losing people and I was just a little kid. And I started to understand that loss is a part of life. It's going to happen. It really is going to happen. So, again, in my conceptualization of being a good parent, in preparing a child for life, you prepare them for loss. But
Mm-hmm.
in being responsible for your own self care, it is learning. Loss is a part of life. And I'm going to get through this
Mm-hmm.
because you are. In the last 6 months or so that we've known each other, you've really grown a lot. You've started to understand a lot of things. And so you have to know that. I'm still going to keep growing as a human being. And one of the things I'm going to grow in is in my capacity to cope with loss. So
Mm-hmm.
you're gracious to yourself, kind to yourself, patient with yourself. Take good care of yourself emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. Let the people who love you take good care of you, support you, hold on to you when you cry on the days when you still feel sad about it all. But also take into account in your own life, loss is a part of life.
That is really good. Really good advice. It's I saw the other day somebody had this tattoo on their arm and it said life goes on. And I don't know, like I know I've seen it before and stuff and heard about it, but it really like clicked. I was like, you know what? Like even as bad as things can be, like life goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a comforting statement because it's like, okay, no matter how bad things are or can get, like life goes on, um, or there's loss, and but life still goes on,
Yes.
and so this too shall pass. Um, but yeah, I have noticed a lot in the past 6 months that we've known each other that I have changed my thinking in some areas and really come to terms with some things and just had a lot of peace about certain issues and things. And I've noticed how I've grown uh, quite quite a lot actually since knowing you. So thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you for this
You're
little
welcome.
bit. That's also going to be very helpful.
And this is what I would say. Every young person, it's part of why I'm doing this channel. It's part of why I meet with you every day. I want to encourage you to keep coming back and listening to me and interacting with me and learning with me because I earnestly know that this will make a change in your life. Trust me, listen to Alyssa. It's really going to help you if you will do this consistently. And young people, oftentimes, they don't have someone. They know in their heart, earnestly know, I need somebody. I can't do this by myself. Especially if, like in my life, they don't have great parents. Oh, great Scott. What am I supposed to do here? Like, I know I need help, and where am I supposed to get it? Right? It's a challenge. And you have really good parents, and yet you still have this challenge that you need an adult who's going to talk to you and support you and encourage you. And so that's part of why I really want young people to know you've got to find somebody. It's seldom going to work out as a young adult that it will be your mom and dad, but you need a mentor. You need someone who's going to hold on to you and help you out and kind of guide you through the challenge of young adulthood because young adults need their independence. They're not going to run home and ask their mommy and daddy. They got from their mommy and daddy what they could get. It's no criticism of anyone's mom and dad. It's just that now that they're an adult, they need to know more and they need to find it in a different source. And so they've got to look for a mentor. They need to find people who can help them during the navigation of this part of their life and answer some of those questions and give them, impart to them some of the wisdom or the experience that are going to help them get through there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the beauty of
Mm-hmm.
having a relationship with somebody older. And
Yeah.
even though, we do talk about stuff and sometimes I give you advice, a lot of times we just hang like we're good friends. It's very possible to have a much older friend, 30 or 40 years older than you. And it's an awesome relationship. It's
Mm-hmm.
good. It brings life.
Yeah.
And it's the last thing that I want to address when you said about the life goes on tattoo. Life does go on, but it doesn't always go on in a healthy way. If you just say, okay, time will heal all wounds, it's going to be all right. Guess again. Time does not heal all wounds. I'm going to address my arm one more time. If I hadn't gone elsewhere after receiving improper medical care the first time, life would have gone on, but I wouldn't have been able to use my hand. We know that. It was already paralyzed. I already didn't have feeling or movement in these fingers. It doesn't just go on. You have to get the proper help or intervention. And we need to take that really seriously at an emotional and psychological level as well.
Mm-hmm.
Life will just go on, but it doesn't mean it'll be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why I always say sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need support. Sometimes you need counseling. Sometimes you just need somebody that's going to sit there with you. When I was younger and I used to read the book of Job, I was pretty critical about Job's friends because those boys ran their mouth and said a lot of dumb stuff. But let's back up. For real. For 7 days, Job's friends sat with him in the dirt. They felt and they respected his grief. They were just there with him. We cannot overestimate the importance of that. And in our day and age, we're all far too busy and self-preoccupied to just sit with someone in their tough times. But that's what we need to learn how to do. And hopefully we need to find somebody somewhere, maybe, who has the capacity to just be with us. Just be there while we are going through it. It's of inestimable value. It doesn't happen enough, but it's really important. And so we all know the change needs to start with me. I need to be that person who can come alongside of someone and just be with them in the great times and in the tough times. Just be there and give support. And the other thing is to recognize that just because I'm breathing doesn't mean I'm living. You know how we did the episode a few days ago about vibrant life? We need to know that it is okay for us to go on without them. That's so hard. I know you know that. And we have to give ourselves permission. Okay, they were so important to me. I did love them like crazy. But I can go on. It wasn't how I saw it before. But it is what I'm going to do. And oh man, I'm going to live a great life. So they would be proud of me. So they would be thrilled about the choices I've made. Yeah, you go on. And you go on in a way that you know would be so important to them, that they would be happy for you about the way you chose to live, that you lived and you are going to live a great and a vibrant life.
That is really good.
Okay, good girl.
Thank you, Violet.
You're welcome, sweet girl. I would like to thank you so much for joining us for this Saturday special on Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you have ideas or questions, life concerns, personal situations that you're happy to share with me and say, I don't want you to talk about this situation specifically on camera, but take the ideas out of it and talk to me, I would be so happy to help you out. Please send me an email at paintabeautifulpicture.com. Go onto the website and check it out and send an email through that way. Give me a comment down below. Find a way to communicate with me. There are lots of ways, and I would be really excited to help you personally in any way that I can, and to do it in a bigger way like we have done today on a Saturday special. Thank you so much for joining Alyssa and me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.